Good evening, everybody. Good to have you at Pastor's Bible Study. I will try not to project my voice because if I do, I sound terrible. But if I just talk like this, I sound pretty normal. So, but it's good to have you here. Turn to Genesis chapter 30. That's where we're at tonight and starting. Each week we do an offering, so we want to be reminded of that. It is for the pastor's discretionary fund, and it's used to bless and benefit people or projects or whatever comes up that we can be able to be a blessing to others. So that's what that is given for. You can participate if you want to. Silence your cell phones and your watches and those types of things. Also, register your attendance. If you could do that, we appreciate that each and every week. Text the church number. What else? What else do I need to do? At the end of this month, I know this is a ways off, but on May 27th, the last Wednesday of this month, we will still have Bible study, but we're going to have a brief charge conference that has to take place. The reason for that charge conference is we normally do that in the fall. You would be correct. We have to elect some different people to be lay representatives in annual conference. That can only happen by charge conference action. So we will have a brief meeting. I think we're going to do it in this room, so you guys won't have to shift. You can come, be in your normal spot. But we'll briefly do a charge conference. Members vote. If you're not a member, you can't vote, but you're welcome to be there. We simply have to vote on a couple individuals, and then we'll roll into Bible study. Okay? Some other people have asked me about Kenya because they know I was there, and they know some of you know I made a presentation to the Miriam Circle. I can do that. I'd be happy to do that. We would look at some time. Maybe I could do that the first Wednesday in June. But later that month, we have representatives coming from Kenya from the Global Methodist Church who will be here going to our annual conference. They're going to be here for over 3 weeks. And actually, I'm the presiding elder of Columbus East Circuit, which means I'm in charge of 32 different churches. And so I'm going to invite our circuit to come on a Monday to be here, Monday before annual conference, for them to be here. And then I'm going to give them an off day on Tuesday. Like, I know I was in Kenya for 2 weeks, and it was hot, and I needed a break, not just to be doing something every day. So they're going to meet some of our staff here. Pastor Bill, Kimberly, some other of our staff, and just get to know them. And then we'll be taking them to Mount Vernon to get ready for the annual conference. But we may have an event that night so that people could come to just to meet them. But people have asked me about that, so that's kind of some thoughts that we're having to put that together. Sorry, I'm drinking my hot tea. Which, when you get it out of the bun thing, it's really hot. And I'm letting it try to calm down, cool down, right? So, I think that's everything that's kind of up and coming things. As you continue to pray every day, pray for our team in Henderson, Kentucky, and the work they're doing there. We're asked Kimberly today, and she's getting good reports, and the roof is going on the house, and the other things that are being done. The flowers are being planted and people are serving and doing what they can do to bless others. So just remember to keep them in prayer. All right, let's pray together. God, we give you thanks that we get to come now, spend time in your word. God, that's never a casual thing. Never just flip open the Bible and just want the longing of who we are to be before you and the relationship we want with you and how we want you to shape and mold our lives into being what they should be. So may your word accomplish that purpose. May your word be what it needs to be in our lives. I pray it become alive and active, and it compels us to obedience and action, not merely information. So thanks for you, and thanks for your spirit. Thanks for this word. In your name, amen. All right, we're still with the life of Jacob. The saga that has turns and twists and unexpected actions. And we are in verse 25. And we have been part of this journey where there's all this drama between his wives and their servants, right? Verse 25 says, soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please release me so I can go home to my own country. Now remember, there have been 12 children born by 4 different people in 14-year time span. Because it says right here, what? After Joseph is born, well, Benjamin hasn't been born, so 11. So,
Dinah's sister.
Yeah. Yes.
Daughter.
Yes.
12.
Yes. 12. Yes. But, yes, I wasn't counting the daughter. Correct. I'm with you, Dinah. Yes. Because I'm thinking of the 12 tribes, but Benjamin's the youngest. But, so 11 have been born in a 14-year period by 4 different people. And shortly after Joseph's born, he's saying, Jacob says, please release me so I can go home to my own country. What does he mean? Because he had to work 7 years and then was given Leah, and he had to work 7 more years. Well, he's given Rachel after a week. Did you catch that last week, right? So he gets 2 wives in 2 weeks. But he has to work another 7 years to pay off the debt that he owes. Right? So that's all going on. So all this is taking place. And he says, let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them by serving you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I've worked for you. Please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. Why is Laban getting blessed? Because Jacob is with him. And why is God with Jacob? Because he's not only in the line of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and is the child of the promise, but he's also the one who had the interaction with God and said, God, I want you to be with me, and if you're with me, then I will serve you. You will be my God, and I will live for you, right? So God is working on Jacob's behalf, and Laban gets the blessing because of that. Now, what's interesting is Laban is smart enough to figure this out, but Laban isn't smart enough to change his behavior. Remember, Laban's the one who starts deceiving Jacob with his wives. Before, Jacob has always been the deceiver. Now he's on the receiving end of being deceived. Right? Tell me how much I owe you. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you and how your flocks and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. But now what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? Because he's been working for his wives, and he stays, you're going to see he's going to stay longer here in a minute. But because he's been there 14 years, Laban has received all this blessing. But he's saying, I need to take care of my own family. What wages do you want? Laban asked again. Jacob replied, don't give me anything, just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. And in the future, when you check on the animals you have given me as my wages, you'll see that I've been honest. And if you find in my flock any goats without speckles or spots, or any sheep that are not black, you will know I've stolen them from you. Why does Jacob need to make this kind of agreement with Laban?
He's trusting in God. God can make him whatever color he wants to make him when he's born.
He needs to what?
God can make those new ones, the newborns, any color he wants to.
Right.
So he's trusting God to take care of him.
Yeah. Yeah. Does Jacob trust Laban, his father-in-law? Why would you have to, when you mention your wages, say, I need a foolproof plan that I'll never get accused I stole them from him? He doesn't trust him.
For good reason.
For good reason. After the whole debacle with his wives, right? So he doesn't trust him. So he comes up with this plan to say, we visually can look at the sheep and know whether or not they're mine or yours. Right? We have. So let me just say this. There's a difference between being taken advantage of, and there's a difference between you being wise enough not to let someone take advantage of you. Nobody faults anybody for when someone takes advantage of them because you were, naive or gullible or didn't know it was going to happen, and sometimes people do that in life. But should we learn from it? That doesn't mean you become untrusting. And in fact, if anything, Jacob learned what? There's only one person I can trust, and it's the living God. The one person who will never fail me is the living God. The one person who won't change the rules of the covenant and commitment is the living God. So we talk a lot about believing in God and we talk a lot about trusting God, but you have to figure out a way to do this in your normal everyday life. Because if we don't surrender control and we keep trying to do it ourselves, we have a phrase for this: fool me once, fool me twice, right? So we have our own proverb about this, in saying, so no, can we always trust humans? No, we can't. But there is a God that you can make covenants, who will always be faithful, live up to his word, be there in your life, is dependable, and won't change the rules. So Jacob is learning this in real time, right? And he goes, look, you mistreated me before. I'm going to make sure you can't mistreat me. And by the way, you, from your own mouth, you said the reason why this was all going well for you is because of the God I follow. So Jacob has to make a choice here. It's not just about getting the spotted sheep or the black ones. It's saying, will I entrust that God will take care of me? Will I entrust that God can work through, obviously, which sheep are more valued? The pure white ones. They want the ones without any spots or blemishes on, right? And he says, I'll take the less desirable ones because I'll trust God that he'll be in it. Don't give me anything, just do this. Verse 34, all right, Laban replied, it will be as you say. But that very day, Laban went out and removed all the male goats that were streaked and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, or had white patches, and all the black sheep. And he placed them in care of his own sons, who took them a 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flocks. So here's the deal. The day he said that, what did he say? Go get all the sheep that are his, take him 3 days' journey, and get them away from my sheep. Jacob can't care for his own sheep if they're a 3 days' journey away. So what is Jacob becoming? An indentured servant to Laban. Even though he said, these are going to be my sheep, he's not even going to get to care for them, because where's his obligation going to be? With Laban's sheep. Because these are his wages. So he's got to work for them. We're going to read later on, he worked 6 years more for Laban before he leaves. But God is going to be with him during those 6 years. Okay? So here's what happens. Then Jacob took some of the fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled off the strips of bark, making the white streaks on them. And when he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they mated. And when they mated in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. So, God either gave him insight or told him to do this, and so what's he do? Every time they mate, guess are they going to have more white sheep, or are they going to have more speckled and spotted sheep? They're going to have more speckled and spotted ones. So he's going to get more, and Laban's going to get less. Verse 40, and Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flock. Why? Because that was the agreement. Those are his now. And at mating time, he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. This is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. And whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them, and they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were to Jacob. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy, with the large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. God is with him. God blesses him. God gives him some sort of knowledge or insight to be able to do this and figure out how to live in such a way that God's blessing is upon him and not on Laban. What do you think is going to happen in chapter 31? But soon Jacob learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything. Do we ever pick and choose what facts we want to remember in life? Nobody mentions the 20 years that Jacob has worked for Laban, do they? Nobody mentions about how he got his wives and how that all went down. So one of the cautions is we often like to voice our opinions or our perceptions like they're truth. I would just say this as a Christian, you need to be really careful to make sure you only speak truth. As best you can, only speak what you know to be truth. It's really hard in America because we live in a place of opinion. And everybody's opinion is right in their own eyes. But this not ought to be for people who follow God. Let's not confuse our preferences with truth. Right? Nobody has preferences in church, right? We all just come here, right? You've never heard someone say, if they don't do it this way, I'm just going to have to find another church. You know why that works today? Because you have as many churches as you want to go to. But if you lived in the first century, there was only one church. Would you walk away from Jesus because of whatever is your issue? Next time you're frustrated about something, ask yourself this question. Is it worth walking away from the faith over? Because in the first century church, there wasn't a church around the corner. There was one church. And in fact, we weren't about church. There weren't even church buildings. You lived as a disciple who made disciples. And when persecution came, everybody fled wherever they could find protection, wherever they could make a living. They all left, but what did they do? They all talked and taught about Jesus wherever they went. And guess what? Small groups rose up all over the place. Some of them eventually became churches. Lydia said, why don't you meet at my house? Does that help frame some things? I always think about that when I go, man, I just don't know if that's the way it should be. Is that your opinion or is that truth? Would you leave the first century church over this? I mean, I wish I could joke and say that there weren't fights about the colors of carpet in churches. But my God, you would think that's the end of the world. What color are we going to pick the pews to be and the color of the carpet? I could understand if somebody said, man, my pastor, I'm just not sure he's preaching theology. He's not preaching the truth. Okay, that might be a reason to really consider. But when did our faith become about what we want instead of God leading us? Jacob's a good example of this, right? Right here. And soon Jacob learned that the sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything, they said. He has gained all his wealth. The other key is whenever somebody uses words like everyone, all the time. Look, friends, there's rarely anything that is everything all the time in life. When people use those kinds of words, here's the other one. There's lots of people who feel this way. That means there's two or one. And we want to make it sound like everybody agrees with us. Like you don't do this. Listen to the words, how they're amplifying it, right? All his wealth has come at our Father's expense. Hey, we just read in 30, he didn't have anything hardly until Jacob showed up. And then God blessed him and he got all this stuff. And now his sons are saying they stole everything from our father. Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. This is one of the words Jacob's been waiting for. It was part of the covenant. If I go to this land and you bring me back, I will worship you. I will honor you. I will live for you. Guess what now? We're now at the time God's calling him back and saying it's time to go home. It's time to go home. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock. And he said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me has changed. But the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father. But he's cheated me. That's a bold move. That's a risky move to talk about someone's dad. But he's speaking what he believes is the truth. But he's cheated me. He's changed my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to do me harm. For he said, the speckled animals would be your wages, and the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And then when he changed his mind and said, the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. What's interesting is Jacob set this up, and he said, spotted, streaked, or black ones. And here's what happened. When he started getting more livestock than Laban did, Laban tried to change the terms of agreement. And he'd say, well, only striped now. And guess what God did? Had a bunch of striped goats. And then he'd say, only spotted ones. Guess what they had? Spotted ones. So Laban tried to change the terms of agreement. Verse 10, one time during the mating season, I had a dream and saw the male goats mating with females that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. And then in my dream, the angel of the God said to me, Jacob, and I replied, yes, here I am. And the angel said, look up and you will see that only streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and you made your vow to me. God remembered that moment, and Jacob is called to remember that moment. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. This is confirmation that God has been seeing what's going on and that God is still interacting with Jacob. It's not wrong to ask for confirmation. It's wrong to depend on confirmation. Do you understand what I mean by that? There are lots of places in the Bible where people will say, because people say to me, oh, the Bible says, don't test God. I agree with that. What does testing mean? Testing means not if you ask and request something from God, but the only way you'll do it is if God, somehow does something so that you will act. It's not wrong to ask for confirmation, but it is wrong when we try to live and say the only way that we're going to live is live by that and that is the only way we can justify our actions. Why? Because you're taking trust and dependency out of the issue with God. One of the essence of our faith is what? You have to live by faith. You have to live by trust. So Gideon, when he puts down the fleece and says, God, could you make it wet on the wool but not on the ground? He's what? Wanting confirmation because God has told him to go and overthrow the camp. And God does it. And then Gideon says what? Well, Gideon's a very fearful in heart individual. He wants to obey God, but he's afraid of the ramifications of following God. Remember when he tore down the image of Baal? When did he do it? At night, when no one could see him. Right? So now that God says, you're going to be my judge and I'm going to elevate you, he says, God, I want to make sure. Can you do this? God says, sure. Then he goes back a second time and says, that was awesome, God. But could you make the ground all wet and the fleece dry? I know and here's the question. How do you know when you've crossed the line? That's a hard question to answer because it has so much to do with our heart and our spirit. But if you need God to do something for you because you won't move unless he does that, be careful of being... You're not asking for confirmation. You're asking God to tell you and assure you. And God can't do that and have you live by faith at the same time. That's a challenging thing in life, I think. And Jacob is one who's trying to live this out. And this dream is a confirmation to him, so he will keep acting and he will return to his homeland. So when you sense God saying something to you, use it as confirmation, but make sure you still respond in trust and faith. That's your motivation. So God invites him to say, it's time to leave. Rachel and Leah responded, that's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. Sounds like Dad cut him out of the will. Right? They say we essentially don't have any rights anymore, even with our own father. And after he sold us, he wasted the money, paid him for us. So not only was Laban envious of God's blessing on Jacob, he was not a good steward of the money that God did give him. "16, all the wealth God has given you from our father legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you." So the wives are supportive. Do what God said. So Jacob put his wives and his children on camels. He drove all of his livestock in front of him. He packed up all the belongings he had acquired in Padan Aram and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. And at the time they left, Laban was some distance away shearing his sheep. And Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. Which is interesting. It's interesting because later on, Laban's going to give this speech about how he's known the God of his grandfather, and Jacob has known the God of his father, his grandfather, Abraham. So they came from the same background where they had some sort of knowledge of the living God. But the way they've lived it out has been radically different. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob had encounters with God and had built altars of God in places of covenant and commitment with God. Laban has said there is a God, but then has idols in his life that are the manifestation of what he thinks that God is. See the difference? That still happens today, friends. There are people who believe in God, but really trust idols. What do I mean? Things like, I'll hear people say they believe in God, and then they talk about fate. They'll talk about karma. They'll talk about these other things like they're equal to God, and they have as much significant influence in their lives as the living God. We often take material things and make them an expression of the God we know. But that's not how we live as people of faith. We live making commitments and covenants with God. Thereby we apply them to life and live them out. So, now remember, the wives have been raised up in this family. So this is what they've seen all their life. So she takes the idols with her. Okay? And took them with her. And Jacob outwitted Laban, the Aramean, where they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob's now deceiving Laban again. Right? So Jacob took all of his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River and headed for the hill country of Gilead. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. How did he catch him? They didn't take flocks with them. Jacob has all these flocks with him, right? So they're moving at a slower pace. So Laban and his men catch up to him. Verse 24, but the previous night God had appeared to Laban the Aramean in a dream and told him, I am warning you, leave Jacob alone. Is that clear? Man, do you ever want God to be that clear in your life? You're like, whew. Yeah, we want God to be clear, but not threatening clear, right? And he says, look, don't touch him. Stay away from him. That's really important because of what you're going to read next. Laban caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob's. What do you mean by deceiving me like this? Laban demanded. Does the pot ever call the kettle black? Is Laban innocent of deceiving? No. And he's like all offended because this has happened. How dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of war? Now, what you know, because you've read this chapter, is he didn't drag his wives anywhere. He went to them and said, this is what I think God's wanting me to do. This is the dream I had, which was the confirmation for what God wants me to do. Where are you at in this? And what did they say? Go. Follow God. Of course, Laban doesn't know any of this. Why did you slip away secretly? Why did you deceive me? Why didn't you say you wanted to leave? Because past experience has told me you will change my wages, you will give me a different criteria to leave, and there will be some other roadblock. Is that not what we've seen as we've read through this chapter? That's why. I would have given you a farewell feast. Does that sound like Laban? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music accompanied by tambourines and harps. Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you. That's an interesting statement. No, he can't. You're over here going, no, he can't. Yeah, first of all, God is with him. Second of all, God has warned him in a dream, don't do this thing, right? You could try. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. Now, this is fascinating because Jacob believes he's heard from God and is responding to God. What's fascinating is Laban believes he is justified to harm Jacob, but God told him not to. And look how righteous I am by not destroying you. That is vastly two different ways to interpret that event, right?
Yeah, because it says not to talk.
What's it say?
To say good or bad. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. So everything he just said, you deceived me, what have you done? Like all of that is going against what the dream said.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is what we're about to read.
Yeah, so the difference would be like saying, well, I've fulfilled everything God said. I didn't hurt you. Okay. Just because we don't do something destructive doesn't mean we're obedient. Just because you don't act on every impulse doesn't make you holy. The key is what? Not to be moral. The key is to respond and obey what the living God says to you. That becomes really important in our lives. And the American church hasn't done a good job of this. We've preached a lot of forgiveness, a lot of salvation, and a lot of you can be forgiven and you can go to heaven. Those are all true statements. Should we preach them? Absolutely. Is that the only way to live out your faith? No. Because you're denying the fact that you are called to be a disciple who makes disciples and fill the commission of why Jesus sent us into this world. To obey is better than sacrifice. And you translate that into New Testament language. To obey is better than being forgiven. Now, we're not perfect, so are we in need of forgiveness? Yes. Do we have, thanks be to God, the offer of forgiveness? Yes, through the obedience of Jesus Christ. Do you understand you can never be forgiven without obedience? Every time that Jesus forgives you, the only reason you were forgiven is because he obeyed. And that is imputed into your life. Righteousness, holiness, obedience is put into your life because he did it for you in place of you. That takes on a little different dynamic, doesn't it? You can't just say, well, man, I'm going to live my life and try really hard and one day Jesus is going to let me into heaven. Maybe. But remember, God doesn't judge on our outward appearance. He judges on the thoughts and motives of our heart. He sees all of us, not just the outward stuff. So God sees every person who intended to do right, and he sees every people who look like they did right but had no intention. You say, why are you talking to us about that? Because I think this is a great case study right here between Jacob and Laban. They're both deceivers. We've been talking about Jacob being a deceiver. Aren't they both deceivers? But one is trying to follow God and is learning how to do that, and one is trying to do it for self and then claim he's doing it in the name of God. See the difference? I could destroy you. I love it. But the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home. But why have you stolen my gods? Okay. I thought this was about you missing your grandkids. How did you not let me kiss my children? The final thing you're going to bring up is, by the way, someone stole my idols. I don't think I can live without these manifestations of God that I can tangibly touch and hold. This is the last straw for Jacob, and Jacob goes off. I rushed away because I was afraid. That's pretty honest, right? Jacob answered, I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. Here's what you need to read there. I was afraid, and the second line is this in code. I don't trust you. But as for your gods, see if you can find them. Let the person who's taken them die. Okay, don't make stupid promises. Don't make rash vows. But he's convinced what? None of us had anything to do with that. He doesn't know what Rachel did, right? And if you find anything else that belongs to you, identify it before all these relatives are, and I will give it back. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the household idols. Laban then went into Jacob's tent to search there, and then to Leah's, and then to the tents of the two servant wives, but he found nothing. Finally, he went into Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. And when Laban had thoroughly searched the tent without finding them, she said to her father, please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search and could not find his household items. Just the time you're like, could this get any crazier? Yes, it can. Now, Rachel's a deceiver, right?
Seems to be a family game.
Yes, right. Well, we become like those we spend time with. Is that not true?
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about telling your kids and your teenagers that. We become like those we spend time with. That's a true statement, right? So, she's seen all this from her dad. She's seen this from Jacob, so she does it. Then Jacob became very angry. Because why? He called Laban's bluff and said, show me the idols. No idols are produced. And he challenged Laban. What's my crime? He demanded. What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? So the same lecture Laban gave him, he's going to give it back now. He's like, look, none of my sheep are all white. None of my goats are all white. I didn't take anything of yours. I've done exactly what you wanted me to do, and now you're still here unhappy. You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us, before our relatives, for everyone to see. Let them judge between you and me. He's like, you want to have it out? We'll have it out right here. Show the proof, and we'll make a judgment who's right and who's wrong. For 20 years I have been with you. Now we know the 14 years with the wives, right? 7 years for what he thought was getting Rachel, and then he got Leah, and then a week later he got Rachel and worked another 7 years. That's his 14 years. And during all that time he had children. So he's saying 20 years, so now he's worked 6 more years just on the flocks. For 20 years I have been with you, caring for your flocks, and all that time your sheep, your goats have never miscarried. In all those years I never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. Now, here's what God is doing. God is working in Jacob's life, and he's teaching him integrity and trustworthiness. Now, this is a hard lesson because Laban's not a fair boss. Laban's not a fair agreement maker. Laban's not a good person to work for. But slowly, God has already started working on Jacob and changing his name from deceiver to faithful. How's he learning it? Hard labor in the hot sun, taking care of animals, and if there was any loss, he had to eat it. They had to come out of his wages. But God is teaching him. So it's really hard when you're going through a hard time in your life and you're like, God, why are you letting this happen to me? Sometimes God is teaching you the character qualities and the lesson you need to learn that's going to benefit you later. It's not because he wants you to be obedient to Laban. It's because he wants you to learn how to live righteously. You hear me? And oftentimes we get mad at the Labans in our lives. We get mad at circumstances and label them Labans. And we say, God, if you would just take this away, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I'm not doing it to you. The Laban is. The circumstance or the person. But what I am doing is building your character so that you can be prepared to live a righteous life when you make your own choices. He was changing his character and nature, and Jacob didn't even know it. If you asked me to reduce the count of your flock, no, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your 2 daughters and then 6 more years for your flock. And you changed the wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac. That's interesting, right? You would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. Jacob has a different interpretation of God speaking to Laban, right? Laban's like, Jacob, you should be so thankful because of the mercy of God, he told me not to harm you. Jacob says, God rebuked you because you're not living right. And he was bearing me and protecting me. Same situation, 2 vastly different interpretations of what's going on. Then Laban replied to Jacob, these women are my daughters. These children are my grandchildren. And these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. Are there ever moments in life where you got to agree to disagree? Laban will not see God's hand in this. And that's a pretty audacious statement to stand there and say, everything you see is mine. He didn't have any of this until Jacob showed up. Be careful about overvaluing your input into something that God's doing. I mean, Scripture's pretty clear, like, right? Isaiah says, all our righteousness is like filthy rags. Do I bring anything to the table? No. Yeah, but I'm really good. Yeah, but I got some talents. Yeah, I've been in ministry a long time. Everything you bring to me, I don't need. But I choose to use you. That's what's so awesome about God. We don't bring anything, and yet he loves us and chooses us for his glory, not for ours. Laban doesn't understand this. Laban still thinks it's about his glory. Everything you see is mine, but what can I do about it now? What can I do now about my daughters and their children? He's like, I could attack you, I could destroy you, but God told me not to, so feel good about my mercy, and aren't you glad you live in my grand favor? So come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it will be a witness to our commitment. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. And then he told his family members, gather some stones, and they gathered stones and piled them in a heap. And then Jacob and Laban sat down beside the pile of stones to eat a covenant meal. They're going to make an agreement with one another. To commemorate the event, Laban called the place Yagar Sahadultha, which means witness pile in Aramaic. And Jacob called it Galeed, which means witness pile in Hebrew. And then Laban declared, this pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of the covenant we have made today. It's a marker, right? This explains why it's called Galeed, witness pile. But it was also called Mizpah, which means watchtower. For Laban said, may the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we are out of each other's sight. It's interesting that Laban now says, I want to include God in this covenant. That means something different to Laban, but it means something powerful to Jacob. Not everyone's going to see faith the way you see it or live the faith the way you live it. But it's okay to trust that God will work in those situations. You don't have to fix everybody else and say, Jacob could have said, I'm not going to make this covenant to you till you understand the living God. And here's what would happen. Laban would have said, yeah, I understand the living God. And Jacob could have said, then why do you have these idols? Why are you a deceiver? Right? So this could go back and forth forever. What's interesting is Jacob, even with all of Laban's flaws and where he's at, he understands this. If God can work in my life, who am I to say that God can't work in Laban's life? May the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we're out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you marry other wives, God will see it if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. See this pile of stones, Laban continued, and see this monument I have set up between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows. I will never pass this pile of stones to harm you. And you must never pass these stones or this monument to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of my grandfather Nahor, to serve as judge between us. This is where they found the common ground. We can both believe, we can both agree we believed in, our grandfathers believed in the same God. So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father. Laban would never say, God is fearsome and awesome. But Jacob took an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line, the covenant, the commitment. And then Jacob offered a sacrifice to God there on the mountain and invited everyone to a covenant feast. And after they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. What's funny is Laban said, if you would have just told me, we would have had a feast. Which I highly doubt. But anyway, what's ironic is God ends up creating a feast. But it's his doing, and it's for his glory, and not for Laban's glory. Does God ever show up in our lives and he says, not now? And the reason it's not now isn't because God doesn't want it to happen. It just needs to happen so he'll get the glory out of it. So one of the ways we live lives is you constantly ask yourself this question, will God get the glory out of this? Now, sometimes you can't control because it involves other people, but as much as it depends on you, live this way. Does God get the glory out of this? So they do have this feast on the mountain. And after they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. And Laban got up early the next morning. He kissed the grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. And then he left and returned home. All right, our saga in another land is over. Jacob is heading home finally. And then chapter 32, we're going to find out what that looks like when he returns home. Guess what the first problem he will face? His brother Esau. That's why he fled. Well, it's to find a wife, but remember, his brother wanted to kill him. Do things ever circle back in life and we have to face things that we ran away from? Does God ever bring things around and say, okay, you avoided it the first time, round two, are we going to learn from this? It'll be fascinating for us to study how Jacob responds to his brother Esau, who wanted to kill him, and see how he responds to him. All right? Lord, thanks for the time together. Thanks that we've learned a lot about how to live our lives and to trust you and to live in such a way that we're living by faith and not by our own purposes and our own agenda. God, we want to be obedient to follow you. We want to give you the glory and not ourselves the glory. We want to be people who walk in trust of you and not the things in our lives. So help us to live this way so that people can see you and not us. In your name, amen. All right, thanks for coming. Have a great night.